this recipe, I'm going to be using 2 pounds of boneless pork sirloin chops, 10 ounces of sliced mushrooms, 1 medium onion diced, some vegetable broth, although you could use chicken broth or water if you don't have any broth on hand. The spices I'm going to be using are some onion powder, some garlic powder, black pepper, salt, and some fresh thyme. You could use dried thyme if that's what you have on hand as well. I'm going to be searing my pork chops with a little bit of avocado oil at the beginning, and then at the end I am going to be adding in some heavy whipping cream. You can make this recipe dairy-free by using full-fat coconut milk, and then I'm also going to be thickening it up with some arrowroot starch at the end. You could also use cornstarch, or if you're doing the low-carb version of this recipe, I will give you a variation for thickening at the end where you omit the arrowroot starch. And to make this a one-pot meal, I will be cooking up some red potatoes up above the pork chops using my tall trivet. I'll just stack the potatoes right on top and they will cook at the same time. First thing, turn on the Instant Pot to saute mode and make sure it is adjusted to high heat. Add 1 tablespoon of oil to the inner pot and let it heat up. While it's heating up, go ahead and season your pork chops with salt and pepper on both sides. Once the pot is hot, go ahead and start searing your pork chops. This takes about 4 minutes on each side, and you will have to work in batches because they won't all fit at once. While the pork chops are searing, I am just preparing my thyme leaves. I'm using 1 tablespoon of fresh thyme leaves, and if you don't have those on hand, you can do 1.5 teaspoons of dried thyme. This would also be a great time to chop your onion and slice your mushrooms if you haven't done it already. Once you've gotten all the pork chops seared, remove them from the pot and set them aside. Add in your onions and mushrooms and saute for about 3 minutes. Now throw in the spices. I'm adding in my thyme leaves, 1 teaspoon of onion powder, 1/2 teaspoon of garlic powder, 1/2 teaspoon of black pepper, and 1 teaspoon of salt. Saute for 1 more minute and then add in 1 cup of broth. Now add the pork chops back to the pan and try to cover them with the liquid and the onions and mushrooms. Now to cook the potatoes above the pork chops, I'm putting in my tall trivet and layering my potatoes on top. If you are doing the keto version of this recipe, omit the potatoes and you can substitute them with chunks of spaghetti squash. Just cut your spaghetti squash in half and take out the seeds, and then cut the spaghetti squash into pieces small enough so that they fit on the top of the trivet without obstructing the lid. Lock the lid, make sure the valve is set to the sealing position, and don't forget to press cancel to turn off the saute mode. The cook time for this recipe is 14 minutes at high pressure, and once the cook time is finished, I will let it natural pressure release for 5 minutes before I open up the lid. While the Instant Pot is cooking, whisk together 1/2 cup of heavy cream or coconut milk if you're doing the dairy-free version, and 2 tablespoons of arrowroot starch or cornstarch. If you are doing the keto version, just get your 1/2 cup of heavy whipping cream ready and don't worry about the starch. Once the cook time is finished and the pressure has been releasing naturally for 5 minutes, go ahead and quick release the rest of the pressure. Remove the potatoes and the tall trivet. Remove the pork chops from the inner pot. Press cancel to turn off the keep warm mode, and then set your Instant Pot to the saute setting on high. If you are doing the keto version of this recipe, go ahead and leave your pot on saute mode and let the pot simmer until the liquid has reduced by about half. That will give you some thickness without having to add any starch to thicken. It usually takes about 10 minutes. Now whisk in the cream and starch mixture and just bring it barely up to a simmer. It'll thicken pretty quickly, and you don't want to boil it heavily after you've added in the cream. Once it has been brought up to a simmer and has thickened up, you can go ahead and add the pork chops back in to the mushroom sauce, and this meal is ready to go.